All right, so we have some kind of breaking news here. Interesting story. Not exactly Russell Wilson getting traded, but still a pretty big deal, I would think, where you have Carson Wentz is going to the Washington football team here. It's a package that is thought to include 2 third-round picks. That's what officially is. That's what they're officially saying, which is kind of a weird wording. I don't know exactly what that means, but regardless, that's what the trade package is. So for the Colts, I think on one hand, I want to take it from the Colts perspective first, and then let's go to the Washington football team perspective. So from the Colts perspective, I think the first thing is, well, this is clearly a loss, right? I mean, you gave up a lot more draft capital than that to get him, so you lose draft capital, and you only got 1 year out of Carson Wentz in a year where you weren't even able to make the postseason. So that did not go as planned necessarily. But the flip side is, listen, getting a star quarterback is tough. Getting a quarterback who can play is tough. So you do sometimes have to take these chances, and you can make the argument that Carson Wentz and it's Matthew Stafford, those two decisions weren't that crazy different. I mean, Wentz clearly hadn't shown as much as Stafford had shown, but it was kind of a similar process, a similar idea there. The issue, of course, was that Carson Wentz just did not work out as well. And it's also a little interesting because I don't think Carson Wentz was horrible last year. He had some bad moments, but I don't think he was a mess. But I think clearly what we just saw was they gave up a first and a third round pick for like an okay quarterback, and that's just not what you want. The Washington football team giving up a couple of third round picks, that's a lot more manageable. Also worth noting here is that the Washington football team is taking on the entirety of Carson Wentz's contract right here, which is fascinating because he's due $26 million he's due $28 million in 2022. Then he's due $26 million and then $27 million the following 2 years. But worth noting here is that the entirety of his money, the only guaranteed money he has left is $15 million, and that'll be gone this first year. So if Washington doesn't like what they see from Wentz after 1 year, they can get rid of him. So for Washington's perspective, I like this move. I think it's fine. Listen, it's hard to get a quarterback. It's worth taking chances. I know a lot of people are like, Carson Wentz, not exactly a superstar. Fine. But you know which superstar you're going to get for not spending that much draft capital? None of them. That's very minor chance that something like that is going to happen. You have to have a quarterback play, and some of the big names are off the board now. There is no Aaron Rodgers. There is no Russell Wilson. So maybe you could have tried to go make a stronger push at one of those guys, specifically Wilson. I think that's a fair argument to make. But in a vacuum, I don't necessarily hate this move. I would say, though, that I don't think this should be it for team building. I don't think you say we have Carson Wentz, we're good. If you still like a quarterback, I don't think it's a horrible move to go out and get a quarterback. I think that you can do both. You can take multiple flyers on these guys. I don't think that's a crazy situation. And obviously, people are going to talk about, which is true, Carson Wentz has been an MVP quarterback before. Also, I think I keep calling them Washington. The Commanders, of course. The Commanders are the team. So yeah, it's fascinating. They're spending a decent amount of money now for Wentz. Do I think that this makes Washington championship contenders? No. I do think it makes him better, though. Carson Wentz was better last year than Taylor Heineke from what I watched. I watched all of them. So could they potentially compete in a division where Dallas might be weaker with some of their free agents going? You also have, the Giants, who can never seemingly make anything happen. The Eagles, who were a playoff team last year as well. So, it's not it's not the NFC least that we've seen in the past by any means, but still, it's a winnable division. I think what's interesting here for the Colts is that, so are we just rebuilding now? What exactly are we doing with the Colts? Because you lose Carson Wentz, who, again, you can live with. It's not the end of the world losing Carson Wentz. The question is, what do you do to replace Carson Wentz? You need a quarterback now, and you were a borderline playoff team. So I think I like it, now that I'm thinking about it, because you can try to get a cheaper option at quarterback. Maybe this is like a Teddy Bridgewater team, and say, you know what? If we're going to get mediocrity at quarterback, we might as well not pay much for that mediocrity at quarterback so we can get somebody else. So we're getting Bridgewater and a player, and they still got a couple of mid-round picks on top of it. So that's the benefit here, I think, of that from the Colts' perspective. And I also think what's good about this is you don't want to fall into the sunk cost fallacy. A lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be making fun of the Colts for, oh my God, you went out and you spent a first-round pick on Carson Wentz only to get rid of him a year later. Well, you know what's better than doing that than keeping him for next year and having that not work out as well. Like, it's better to, at least in this scenario, you can move off of him, and you don't want to completely just keep the mistake going. I don't think. I think it's okay to sit here and say, it was a mistake, so we're going to acknowledge it was a mistake and move on. That's, to me, I think what you do when you make a mistake. You don't sit here and say, we gotta, I think it's actually very natural for people to say, well, we spent the first round pick on him, so we got to give him an extra year. There's no reason for that. You don't think about how did we get here. You just think about we are here. What's the best move going forward? I think a good example was the Roberto Aguayo pick that Tampa Bay had. If you forget, Tampa Bay got clowned on, rightfully so, for drafting a kicker in the second round who ended up sucking. So that was like, oh man, you really screwed that up. But what Jason Light and the Buccaneers did was they got rid of him after that year. They said, okay, well, that was a mistake. Let's move off of that mistake. Let's not double down and make that happen. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I also think that another thing, little bits of information to talk about as well. Washington, apparently part of it is that, so Wentz is due $28 million this year, and $5 million of it is due next week, actually. So it seemed like there was incentive for Indianapolis to make this happen right away, to not have to spend that $5 million. Also, interestingly enough, the Colts, apparently, according to Ian Rappaport, are now looking for potentially signing Jimmy Garoppolo, or I guess trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, which kind of feels like a very lateral move. Like, why get rid of Carson Wentz and add Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, the way I like this move for the Colts is if, they draft like a Kenny Pickett who has like a high floor. I haven't finished his tape entirely, but from what I've seen, it's like, okay, he's someone who can play day one. Someone like that I can see being a logical move where you're now not paying much for a quarterback, or like a Teddy Bridgewater, like a Jameis Winston, someone who you're not paying much, who will give you similar production to what Wentz gave you last year. I think that makes sense. Although, again, they don't have a first round pick, so that makes it more difficult to draft someone, but maybe even in the second round. That's another complicated thing. And now you're getting more draft capital. Again, it's weird because it almost feels like, oh yeah, giving Wentz to someone else, that's a good move. That's kind of why I guess I don't know. I kind of like it from both teams' perspectives, I guess, even though I usually feel like that's a cop-out, simply because I feel like for the Colts, and the more I'm talking about it, it's like, well, they're getting out of this bad contract, and that alone is a win. And for the Commanders, it's like, I think that you have to take chances when you don't have a quarterback. So seeing if maybe you see something on film that Frank Reich couldn't figure out, that's the logic. I don't know if it's true. So I guess if I had to pick a winner, give me Indianapolis, just because they got out of the bad contract. I don't see a team winning a Super Bowl with Carson Wentz, but that's kind of how I feel about it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.